Dear friends and colleagues, thank you all for being here, both in person and online, and especially Mr. Burak Ozdepek, Third Secretary of the Turkish Embassy in Athens, and Sehide Kayadela, a counselor at the Turkish Embassy in Athens. Thank you for honoring us with your presence. For those who don't know me, my name is Sotiria Nikolou, and I am the NIA-Librarian and also the moderator for today's event. We are very happy that in the framework of the NIA-Library's activities, we had the second book presentation today. The book presentation is the first of the NIA events organized in this academic year, but we are especially happy about this event because it is a collaboration between the NIA-Library, the Nordic Library at Athens, and the Finnish Institute at Athens. We are always pleased to collaborate with our colleagues from other archaeological schools and institutes. At this point, please allow me to thank our colleagues from the Nordic Library at Athens, the head librarian Patrick Talatas, and the academic librarian Eddie Bierkloff, who immediately embraced this collaboration. In addition, I would like to thank our colleagues from the Finnish Institute at Athens, starting by the director, Petra Pakanen, for her kind hospitality to host the event at the Finnish premises. And moreover, I would like to thank the assistant director, Lassi Jakola, and the intern, Lisa Zalkanen, for their kind collaboration and help on the technical matters. Finally, I would like to warmly thank my colleagues at the Netherlands Institute at Athens for their support and for making this event possible. Our director, Professor Dr. Anne Grisbert, our deputy director, Willem Lederboer, Emi Makri-Mestroupian, Yanni Makri, Galina Yalensko, and Yanni Dimopoulos. Now we have several wonderful events planned for this year, and we will be very glad if you could join us there as well. So please stay tuned and see our social media or our website. Now, before I begin, I give the floor to the director of the Finnish Institute at Athens, Petra Pakanen, to welcome you as well. We warmly want to thank as well the author, Özge Calafato, for presenting her book here today. So I will say a few words about the author at the beginning, and then Petra will join us. Özge Calafato is lecturer in literary and cultural analysis at the University of Amsterdam and the author of Making the Modern Turkish Citizen, Vernacular Photography in the Early Republican Era, which was published in 2022. The book explores the photographic self-representations of the urban middle classes in Turkey in the 1920s and the 1930s. Calafato's research interest lies at the intersection of photography, archives, memory, and cultural identity. Between 2014 and 2020, she worked as the assistant director for the Akasa Center for the Photography at the New York University, Abu Dhabi. We wish her best of luck with her book, and we can't wait to hear her presentation. So now I give the floor to the director of the Finnish Institute, Petra Pakanen.
Thank you for coming. I'm first thanking every one of you coming, because we here at the Finnish Institute, we're very happy to see new faces as well. And of course this important thing that you mentioned, the collaboration, and they work together with our neighboring institutes, particularly here around this area in Kukaki, and also the library, between the libraries. It's always welcome. It is something that we really cherish dearly, and it is recommended for everyone. Thank you for the diplomatic representations and representatives who are coming here to this evening, and everyone who is there online. We have also online presence here, which is it's fantastic to see you from so many even countries, and they are on the different corners of Europe actually joining us this evening. This is, of course, this is a topic which is fascinating. It is fascinating those years that your book and the photographies deal with are in many ways formative, and I'm absolutely sure that they are more and more these days referred to in different kinds of contexts. So it is very interesting. I mean, and intriguing, interesting, and we really do look forward to hearing and seeing what you have to say to us, and we learn more about the vernacular photography during the years and 20s and 30s in Turkey. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being everyone here. Very warmly welcome.
Thank you so much for coming. I extend my thanks to the Netherlands Institute at Athens, Finnish Institute at Athens, and Nordic Library. It's an amazing collaboration. I'm so thrilled to be together today. Thank you so much. And it's very special to have this book talk in Greece, where the histories, the connected histories are so enmeshed, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts, your questions, and special thanks to Sotiria for everything. We've been talking a lot about this talk over a year, and it's really wonderful to be here finally. And thank you so much, Petra. And as you mentioned, the book was published 3 years ago, and the Turkish translation came out last year, around this time, actually, exactly around this time. I had a book talk in Ankara to celebrate the Turkish translation, and but also the research itself started 10 years ago, so it's also a bit of a celebration of this decade-long journey, as it were. So I start with this photograph, so everything started with this photograph dated May 1st, 1941. In 2014, I found it in an antique shop opposite the Kızlar Sahan in Izmir, and had the immediate urge to purchase it from the shop owner, who, with a little bit of arrogance, nearly refused to sell it to me, because he wanted to make sure that I was worthy of becoming the future owner of this photograph. I was attracted by the naive, shy smile of the young man holding the hand of a young woman who looked slightly embarrassed, thank you. The delicate smile on the woman's face as she looks off camera, an audience consisting of 4 young women in the background, an empty hall decorated with colored glass, a sunny garden outside, and the gaze of the photographer trying to center the two in such a way as to create the perfect composition. But what really drew me to this photograph was the handwritten note on the back that read "The sweetest days of life." Hayatın en tatlı günleri. It's striking that the note refers to life rather than our life, and to my trip, gezim, rather than our trip, in the singular. Similarly, unlike many portraits of the era that are addressed to other family members, particularly in-laws, the note on this photograph is a standalone statement, almost a note to self, a private memory. What defines a moment as the sweetest time of one's life? What makes one describe a photograph moment as such, and for whom? I ask myself, who was supposed to see this image, and wonder about the path through space and time that brought it to an antique shop in Izmir decades later. My fascination with the image, and perhaps with the seller's dedication to the photograph too, stopped me from arguing any further. This was the only item I bought from him that day. Little did I know that this transaction would initiate a long journey of discoveries and academic challenges, paving the way for this book on photographic representations on urban middle classes in Turkey in the 1920s and 30s. Yet before the research came the collection, which informed the selection of my corpus. In my role as the assistant director for ACASA, the photography center at NYU Abu Dhabi, now it's renamed as the Photography Archive in 2020, I purchased over 17,000 photographs from antique stores and secondhand booksellers, so sahaflar, in Istanbul and Izmir, primarily between 2014 and 2018. The collection includes images from the late Ottoman era and the modern Turkish Republic. 5,000 of them are available online with metadata. The rest are waiting to be processed. The archive work takes a lot of time, always. The more I worked on the processing of the collection, cataloging and digitizing the images, the more I felt the urge to look at them in detail, having a particular interest in the early Republican era. My selection of 60 photographs featuring individual and group portraits taken on a variety of occasions, such as national holidays, birthdays, weddings, and family outings, reflects the changing social and political scenery of the country under the Kemalist regime and provides insight into the newly modern Turkish secular public life that was being formed. While the selected photographs were collected only in 2 cities, they demonstrate a significant geographical diversity, reflecting the large-scale internal migration in Turkey that the country witnessed from the 1950s onwards. The study is divided into 4 parts, exploring the relationship between photography and gender, photography and the body, photography and space, and photography and language. And given that visual representation emerged as a central element of the Kemalist nation-building process, the parts of the study correspond to the key areas where the state tackled when building a new visual vocabulary for the Turkish nation. Despite its emergent popularity since the 2000s, the scholarship concerning vernacular photography remains a niche area for researchers. The study aims to contribute to a shift in understanding of vernacular photography, from seeing it as an absent present to treating it as a principal subject for academic research. I use the term vernacular photography in the sense of popular photography, photography of the everyday, produced in commercial studios by itinerant photographers or in the home by handheld consumer cameras. The study is strongly inspired by Elizabeth Edwards' notion of theaters of the self, that I have taken by relating it to Judith Butler's notion of gender performativity as referring to photographs as a performative space in which people can assert and negotiate their emerging positions as modern class and gendered subjects. In the book, I also draw upon Nelson Goodman's notion of world-making as that of photographic performativities through which people make worlds by enacting multiple selves in response to the worlds that are created around them. Elizabeth Edwards also adds that photographs have a performativity themselves, an affective tone, a relationship with the viewer, a phenomenology of not content as such, but as active social objects projecting and moving into other times and spaces. This photograph from January 15, 1941, shows a young student of medicine named Nedim Akyüz working on a cadaver. The writing on the print reads, "To my dear mother, canım anneciğim." Although to the contemporary gaze, this image may appear as a curious choice of a photograph to dedicate to one's mother, medicine was considered to be one of the most prestigious and sought-after professions at the time, particularly for men whom it would turn into highly eligible bachelors. Thus, this photograph speaks to some of the central concerns of my study, highlighting how the performances of certain familial, professional, and social roles in vernacular photographs cemented the making of the modern Turkish citizen. Vernacular photographs from the 1920s and 30s point to the class nature of the modern Turkish citizen image and reveal how Turkish citizens, especially those of the new constituted urban middle classes, actively participated in the making of the aesthetics of citizenship through self-representations in portraiture. The image of the modern Turk was constructed and affirmed as a westernized, primarily urban and middle-class citizen, explicitly gendered as either the new Turkish woman or the new Turkish man. Vernacular photography played a key role in producing, reinforcing, and circulating, but also to some extent, renegotiating the desired normative image propagated by the elites of the newly established nation state. At the same time, the efforts of the urban Turkish citizens to build a secular middle class life for themselves were not just informed by the Kemalist policies, but also influenced by their class aspirations and other wider sociocultural developments of the time, from Western fashion trends to movies to the increasing availability of modern consumer items, including amateur cameras. In an era where when visual culture was systematically organized and tightly controlled by the single-party regime, vernacular photographs provide a somewhat less structured and regulated site, able to illuminate how Turkey's nation-building process, including the formation of middle-class citizenship and the construction of the new public life, unfolded at the level of the everyday lives of its citizens, as they visited photography studios or engaged in sports and leisure activities in public spaces. Vernacular photographs resonate with many of the social and political tensions of the time. This was supposed to come a minute later, but we can sit with it for a bit. Founded in 1923, after a decade-long war period, including the Turkish War of Independence between 1919 and 1923, the ruling elites of the Turkish Republic tasked themselves with making a new Turkish nation, building upon the dynamics of the modernization efforts of the late Ottoman era. As Meltem Ahıska notes, the Kemalist regime was marked by a boundary management between the East and the West, between those who advocated Occidentalism and the rapid adoption of Western etiquette, and those who were anxious to preserve traditions in the early years of the Republic. This boundary management manifests itself in family photographs in relation to the role of women in society, the man's shifting position in the family, and the integration of older traditions into modern Republican imagery. The representation of gender, particularly the visibility of women, stood at the heart of the Kemalist revolution, which they believed would put Turkey on the global political map as an advanced westernized nation. After the foundation of the Republic, the term Cumhuriyet Kadını, the Republican woman, became increasingly popular. The term is widely used today, and one can trace it back to the 30s. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, the image of the new Turkish woman as the Republican woman was promoted through newspapers, magazines, novels, and films, particularly catering to the middle-class women. Unlike most national revolutions, the Kemalist revolution was primarily concerned with the construction of the ideal woman, as Nilüfer Göle notes, instead of the ideal man. The reconstruction of an ideal woman started with the promotion of a Western, non-veiled appearance associated with being progressive. The Kemalists perceived women as the bearers of Westernization and carriers of secularism. As Göle explains, for the regime, the emancipation of women meant their participation in the public sphere and in the workforce together with men unveiled. In this image, for instance, with her boyish appearance and posture, Bedriye represents a class desire to construct an image for herself that resonates with what the new Turkish woman represented for the Kemalist regime, a secular, westernized, educated woman who's no longer covered. When assigning gender roles to the modern Turkish citizen, the Kemalists had to negotiate feminist movements in Western industrialized countries and a conservative Muslim pushback that wanted to exclude women from the public sphere. In addition, like many other modern political regimes of the time, the Turkish Republic was built on the endorsement of heterosexuality, with love, sexuality, and desire tightly regulated through marriage and inheritance laws. While in the public sphere, women remained the symbols and advocates of modernity, however, they were incorporated into the nation-building process as protectors of tradition at home as well. Under the influence of the rising fascist regimes in the 1930s, motherhood was increasingly designated as the primary national duty for Turkish women. In this context, beauty contests played an important role in promoting the image of the modern Republican woman. In an original postcard size gelatin silver print dedicated to my dear sister Ulviye, per the Ottoman Turkish inscription on the reverse, the beauty queen of 1931, Naşide Saffet Hanım, poses for the camera in an official photo shoot hosted by the contest organizer, Cumhuriyet newspaper. Dressed elegantly yet modestly, she represents not only the Western look that the Turkish state aspired to, but also the poise and sophistication that were supposed to accompany it. This image also stands out as an intriguing example of how a studio portrait of a Turkish beauty queen came to be circulated as an icon among family and friends in the 1930s. It suggests that sharing images of Turkish beauty icons to propagate an ideal image of femininity was already a known practice in the 1920s and 30s. While beauty contests, just like photography, Western clothes, European furniture, or ballroom dancing were framed and encouraged as markers of modernity and social progress, they were equally seen as vital opportunities to prove the strength of the new Turkish nation to the world. The beauty contests of the 30s reveal a key moment in modern Turkish history where the kinds of ideological negotiations took place between the desires and ambitions of women and the limitations of state feminism. Actively endorsed and widely covered by the press of the time, the annual beauty contests served to naturalize and congeal modern gender norms for Turkish women, particularly through the repeated photographic representations of the contestants published in papers throughout the year, and also, as we see in this image, circulated in the form of postcards. I'll give you a second to look at these 6 images. The seemingly ambiguous series of portraits featuring a prominent feminist educator, Nebahat Hamit Karaorman, urges us to rethink the ways in which we interpret gender in photographs. As an advocate of Kemalist modernization, Nebahat Hamit Hanım is a fascinating figure. Born in 1905, Nebahat Hamit Hanım taught pedagogy and mental health at the Çapa Teachers Training School for Women and philosophy at the Kabataş High School. Aslı Davaz mentions her name among the first feminists of the Republic as a sex education specialist who advocated for raising awareness of sexuality and adding sex education classes to the curriculum in all schools. Being featured in several newspaper articles at the time, we observe how strongly she campaigns against child marriage while defending traditional gender roles in family. Consequently, what the ambivalence of the performance of gender in Nebahat Hamit's portraits appears most expressive of is not an active act of subversion on her part, or that of the photographer, but rather the ambivalence that inhabited the ideal Republican woman at the heart of Kemalist ideology. The portraits evoke the same ideological tension that burdened Turkish women of the era as Naşide Safet's photographs, on the one hand adopting a serious image of the modern career woman who refrains from emphasizing her sexuality to preserve her chastity, and on the other hand, taking on looks in tune with the idea that the new Turkish woman should be beautiful and feminine. Just like women, urban middle classes welcome photography as an opportunity to perform. Urban class, middle class men welcome the opportunity to perform their rapidly changing gendered and class identities as well-bred youths, joyful soldiers, true gentlemen, liberal husbands, or loving fathers, negotiating their male subjectivities within the restrictions of the hegemonic masculinities and state feminism imposed by the regime. Although the Kemalists privileged the construction of an ideal woman for the Republic over that of an ideal man, the role and appearance of man also had to be redefined in the context of a Turkish society that sought to portray herself as modern. While the veil for women was never officially banned, the state did intervene in men's attire through the Hat Law in 1925, where fez was no longer allowed. In addition, Atatürk closely associated his public image as a charismatic leader and modern statesman, carefully crafted and communicated domestically as well as internationally with the image of the modern Turkish nation in progress. By using the medium of film, the father of the nation, Atatürk, tried to leave, as Enis Dinç quotes, tried to leave nothing to chance when presenting himself and the Turkish nation as countering Orientalist stereotypes. Atatürk thus represented and embodied both the new nation and the new man that the Republic aimed to create. Turkish speakers are smiling. The molding of the new Turkish Republican man shows up clearly in vernacular photographs, particularly in military portraits, a major component of Turkish male identity. As Ayşegül Altınay argues, in Turkey, by defining national pride through masculine pride in the practice of military service, nation-state builders of Turkey have culturalized and masculinized an emerging political process. The myth of the military nation is a highly gendered discourse that has important implications for gendered citizenship and gendered self-identification. Just as Turkish culture is defined through military, Turkish masculinity is defined through military service. As we see in the state discourse, as well as in the perception of many Turkish citizens, men become men after serving in the military. Taken on April 3rd, 1934, this image features a young soldier, probably a graduate of a military high school, about to start his professional career as a soldier at the time of this photograph. Rather than the young man himself, however, it was the Turkish inscription on the back that attracted my attention when I encountered the photograph. The inscription reads, "Şişmanlayacaksın," which translates as "you will put on weight" or "you will get fat." Perhaps it was the soldier's retroactive prophecy written later in life to his younger self who ended up gaining weight. Or perhaps "Şişmanlayacaksın" was a contemporary inscription by a family member or the soldier himself. Leaving these speculations aside, I've been intrigued by how the reference to the soldier's weight evokes concerns about his body image. The construction of the new desired female Republican body relied on the replacement of the veiled rural and therefore considered outmoded body with the disciplined, healthy, urban, and therefore civilized body, as Alemdaroğlu writes. Women's unveiled fit bodies were shown off as symbols of the transformation of the Turkish nation itself, as proof of how modern and secular Turkey had become. Playing sports was deemed as a patriotic act, and the first sportswomen were perceived as heroic figures devoted to their nation. As in the case of other public performances like singing, dancing, and beauty contests, the regime used a combination of discourses to justify women's participation in sports nationally and internationally, negotiating conservative social norms that obliged women to curtail physical activities in public. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, educational networks were used as effective tools to change traditionalist and Islamist attitudes towards women's participation in sports. Indeed, while vernacular photographs with Turkish women posing in sports outfits remained scarce until the 1940s, girls wearing sports clothes repeatedly appeared in school portraits, particularly in pictures taken during the festivities such as the Gymnastics Fest and later the Youth and Sports Day celebrated on May 19. The overwhelming number of urban middle-class representations in vernacular photographs is an indicator of the regime's investment in encouraging and implementing a modern secular image of Turkishness. However, this desired image was not always faithfully reproduced, but also sometimes tweaked by incorporating elements from Ottoman and Turkic traditions, such as circumcision ceremonies or childbed arrangements, as we observe in these two photographs. Similar to sports, where both ancient Turkic traditions and such as oil wrestling and Western sports such as tennis were amalgamated into the modern national Turkish identity, the inclusion of circumcisions and childbeds in modern photographic representations show how the Turkish nation created a distinct hybrid visual vocabulary. Enabled by the market and photography archives, pictures that were meant to be kept mostly private at the time are made public today, revealing this hybridity. In the formative years of the Republic, postpartums and circumcisions were reimagined through photography, incorporating such representations into the making of the modern Republican manhood and womanhood. The integration of these ancient customs, seen as milestones in people's lives, independent of their class, into modern photographic portraiture suggests the degree to which photography was embraced and democratized in Turkish society, increasingly appealing to a larger public beyond the urban middle classes. They help us explore what was allowed, to what degree, what was allowed to be documented and shared, what emerged into the public domain, and what remained private, kept from the public eye. Childbed and circumcision pictures reinforce a modern imagery of motherhood, of womanhood and manhood for the emerging urban middle classes, while also suggesting that certain Ottoman, Turkic, and/or Ottoman Islamic traditions didn't necessarily have to be rejected, but could also be made compatible with the desired Republican visualities. Looking at the relationship between photography and space making, the Kemalist regime for the Kemalists, creating new extended geographies of public life around newly constructed Republican spaces was as important as the forging of new Republican citizens. The effort to redesign the public realm as a secular space that would also include women prompted extensive transformation of both the central cities and smaller towns through ambitious architectural projects and intensive urban planning, all meant to mark a radical break from the Ottoman past. This making of new Republican spaces through photography was intertwined with the making of class identities in both the urban and the rural. For the newly middle classes, the desire to enact modernity and project a normatively class and gender identity was closely linked with the desire to grow roots in a novel territory which citizens were urged to adopt as their new homeland. In this context, citizens seem to have complied with the Kemalist modernization project as part of a social and sentimental bonding process of which photography was a major part of. The early Republican era corresponds to a period when studio photography had become an integral part of the middle class everyday life, producing an array of portraits that constitute the basis of what is associated with early Republican imagery today. As this photograph taken in Izmir's century-old Hamza Rustam studio illustrates, photography studios actively participated in the forging of a new urban middle-class Turkish identity and social memory for the cities and towns they operated in. A Cretan Muslim who immigrated to Izmir in the mid-1920s, around 25, at the end of the exchange. Hamza Rustam's story is a striking example of of the important role that photographers played in the making of modern secular Turkish middle-class identity as envisioned by the Kemalist nation-state. From a collapsing empire and its ever-changing demographics to the growing pains of a newly founded modern nation-state, the life of Hamza Rustam and his family epitomizes the lives of hundreds of thousands of Muslim immigrants who went through the trauma of displacement. The trajectory of Hamza Rustam's photography studio from Crete to Izmir, moreover, coincides with the remaking of Izmir as an exemplary modern Republican city and with the creation of a new Turkish Muslim bourgeoisie that Hamza Rustam and his family were part of and contributed to, with the thousands of photographs they produced between the 1920s and 40s. This studio still exists today and run by the grandson of Hamza Rustam, Mert Rustam, and I had the chance to interview him. I've been in touch with him since. He's been a great supporter, and he has one of the largest glass plate negatives and his own collection that he's building with photographs from Izmir from the 19th century onwards. So this is an incredible treasure that holds still. Simultaneously, amateur photography was becoming popular among urban households, enabling a wider variety of representations of Turkishness outside the studio. Until the mid-40s, when studio photography became largely democratized, however, it was the itinerant or à la minute photographers who filled the vacuum in the countryside, documenting large segments of society in smaller towns and remote villages. The à la minute camera and colorful backdrops used in the photographs attracted a curious audience, some of whom may not have had access to photography before. À la minute photography was instrumental in domesticating the street and public life at the time, allowing citizens in the cities and the countryside to generate and perform their desired selves in front of the camera, at times for the first time. In urban areas, à la minute photographers could also be seen as part of a system of social surveillance, operating largely in the form of social pressure that sought to enforce the modern self propagated by the state. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, we also observe how playfulness was gradually introduced to Turkish photography with the arrival of snapshot cameras into middle-class households. In this curious case of 1931, a small-size snapshot shows two men eating in our room, per the Ottoman Turkish inscription on the reverse, still used here, despite the alphabet change in 1928. Signed by Feridun Mahmud, possibly one of the men in the picture, this tightly staged image suggests that by the 1930s, the Turkish middle classes had discovered the performative potential of photography as a form of entertainment. As snapshot photography gained popularity, photography produced outside the studio space offered new possibilities for experimentations with self-representations, which, however, still remained within the realm of Republican gender normativities. The complex networks in which photographic prints were circulated within and outside family circles served multiple functions as modes of communications and tokens for self-promotion. In this Shukri Bey series, here, a group of men holding respectable positions at a government bank, so they're all muavin at the Ziraat Bankası as muavin is deputy directors. They use photography and photographic inscriptions, as well as exchanges of photographic prints, to endorse, cement, and disseminate the image of the well-educated and well-mannered modern gentlemen who are loyal to the principles of the Kemalist regime. The portraits in the Shukri Bey series suggest that a wide range of people adopted the culture of gifting and exchanging photographs, contributing to the making and the circulation of a model image of Turkish citizenship in the early years of the Republic, and reinforced new class and gender normativities for modern Turkish men and women who use photography as an opportunity for self-expression. The 1928 alphabet change from Arabic to Latin letters, followed by a comprehensive language reform in the 1930s, presents an exceptional historical moment for modern Turkey and can be tracked in the transformation of handwritten notes on photographs. The way inscriptions were written and replicated unveils the etiquette that emerged around the circulation of photographs among urban middle classes across space, gender, class, and age. Photographs were exchanged and inscribed to make citizens appear respectable in the eyes of their family, colleagues, and society at large. Through the inscriptions, they reinforced their desired selves, embracing cultural and social values like kindness, politeness, respect for the elderly, love for family, appreciation for friendships, and admiration for their seniors. The wealth of vernacular material from those years available in antique markets and in collections today offers a fascinating lens into the everyday life of the time. The ordinariness of these photographs is what makes them a great resource for understanding, imagining, and reconstructing the broader social histories in which they were produced. Yet, for extensive periods of time, no great value was attributed to these photographs, so much so that they were thrown away and ended up circulating in the market for very low prices. Indeed, it's only recently that they have started to evoke the interest of collectors and researchers. So the timing of the study, therefore, corresponds also to a rising interest in vernacular photography, particularly in Turkey. Consequently, in making the Modern Turkish Citizen, I hope to not only have contributed to a better understanding of the making of the Modern Turkish Citizen in the early Republic, but also to have elevated vernacular photographs as objects to the level of rich first-hand resources for academic research by placing them at the center of cultural analysis. Thank you very much. This is actually, as I was doing research over the years, I came across this studio many times from Istanbul, which bears the same surname that my mother's side has. They're from Kosovo. So digging up, I realized that this is our extended family. So I kind of, and maybe a new project is coming out of it. It's been a while. It's harder to research one's own family, I feel like. But I wanted to end this with this photograph. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Özge, on this wonderful journey, I would say. Especially to me that I've never been in Turkey. That was very nice. Yes. So please, if someone has to make any question, offer. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for your talk. You mentioned two photo studios. The one we can see here on the photograph, and the other one from Izmir.
Yeah.
What do we know in general about the photographers and the photo studios? Let's say about the numbers. I guess in Istanbul or in Izmir there are quite a lot. And I know looking at photographers, we can see from the late 19th century quite a huge mobility. But you mentioned it with Izmir, I came from Crete to Izmir,
Yeah.
and you mentioned Kosovo with the name. So I guess maybe even from Western Europe, photographers came to Istanbul. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, early years of photography, photography enters the Ottoman territories immediately after it was invented and licensed. So the Ottoman sultans would actually commission photographers to document the empire. So during that time, you have a lot of European photographers also coming, not only to Constantinople, but also to Egypt, for instance, right? It's still under the Ottoman Empire. In the early Republican period, there is, of course, a Turkification process. What's fascinating is I started this research 10 years ago, and during that time, there's a lot of growing interest, but still we know so little about the history of studios. There is maybe 1 or 2 books, 2 to 3 scholars who work on it. So that's why when we were working on the archive, building the archive, cataloging, so we would make sure to transcribe the addresses of the photo studios, because even on Istiklal Street, right, in Istanbul, where you have most of the studios traditionally, in the Ottoman times, but also in the modern Republican era, addresses might have shifted, right? The street numbers, the building numbers have shifted. So it's very valuable to be able to note those. But in terms of photo studio histories, it's mostly through the stamps of the photographs we have. I got lucky with Hamza Rustam. It's actually, I don't read Ottoman, so I work with friends who translate it for me. So this is actually the stamp, the logo of the studio. It took me a while to realize that it's the Ottoman. But what's also interesting is, so there is the alphabet change in 1928, but this doesn't mean that everybody shifted overnight, right? You still see, for instance, inscriptions written in Ottoman throughout the 1940s into the 50s. So yeah, I got lucky a little bit with this photograph because the studio turns out to be active still, but this is one of the, I think, very few exceptions in the world. Yeah. So much to be done. I love this side of the history, working with photo studios.
Yes. Hi. Thank you. This has been fascinating. While I was looking at these photographs, two connected questions were born in my mind. One was whether all these people, I mean, we saw all these people with Western attire. Was this a totally abrupt change? So, I mean, did everybody begin to present themselves so French? Some of the haircuts are totally French, you know? Very westernized, that's one question. And the other one would be, was there a connection of more traditional parts of society to photography at all? So I mean, you're collecting probably this kind of photograph, but I wonder whether you could tell us anything.
Yeah, so that's actually exactly my argument in the book, that this is, you know, I'm looking at a collection of 17,000 photographs, but also, for instance, on auction sites now, you have more photographs than any archives. There's a lot of material in other archives as well. So 1920s and 30s is precisely fascinating because the minority groups or different communities, it's not that they didn't exist, different representations didn't exist, but their access to photography was largely limited. So we have different representations, lower classes or more conservative society communities that are not as rapidly westernized. But that's mostly through the à la minute photographs, right? The itinerant photography. And what this does is, the sheer amount, the majority representation that we see today from that era corresponds to this kind of westernized, secularized, modern Turkish citizen image, which is now, which has become which is being associated with the visual vocabularies of the time, but also showing the state's investment in creating this visual vocabulary and how much the citizens participated in this vocabulary making. So in that sense, it's about the representation and what the making of the modern Turkish citizen image entails, rather than who or it's not quantitative per se, right? But there is an active middle class presence that supported the image making at the time.
Back to your first slide, when you showed us the photograph of the dancing couple, yes, especially the note on it, hayatın en tatlı günleri, it immediately made me think that this is a note taken by a third person rather than one of the couple.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, as a historian, when you're looking into these photographs,
Yeah.
which do not come from a single private
Yeah.
archive of a family or anything, like how do you, like, what are the limits, what are the extents that, like, you go to identify each and every aspect of it?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. So this is part of my PhD research at the School of Cultural Analysis at the University of Amsterdam, which works with a very specific methodology of centering research on cultural objects, which is photography in my case. So I really, for me, the photograph as the object, three-dimensional as a print with its materiality, was the center. So it wasn't as much who these people are in the photographs. So I wouldn't dig much deeper. So this was my methodology, right? What the photograph says and what it represents, different components of the aesthetics. But the answer is twofold. One is when, in the case of Nebahat Karaorman, for instance, this was another fascinating. The reason why I wanted us to sit with it for a bit is it really plays with gender image, right? So again, there's actually a seventh image that confirmed the identity of this person. Without that, it's very ambivalent. I mean, one can debate, of course, it's our gaze, it's our contemporary gaze that's projected. Female, male, or white matters. But it's also fascinating because of the limited access to photography. Even sometimes with a little note, a surname or a name, one could find so much, and they would be really educators or prominent figures of the time. So that's also fascinating. With so little information, one can really trace and map out the, in a way, intellectual elite of the time. Nebahat Karaorman is a prominent feminist educator, but not as popular as, for instance, Halide Edip, right? So it's almost, in a way, second tier, with all due respect to Nebahat Hoca. But in this case, also, one of the points I make with this research is to be careful when we read photographs, not to overinterpret. It's very, very easy to get carried away and have arguments deducing. For instance, for me, I immediately think of the man as the person who wrote it, and then I catch myself, why am I thinking that? Like, what makes me think that it's the man and not the woman, right? Who looks into the camera has more agency in a way. Because I think here it says gezim, right? So that's why I thought it's one of the two, but could also be
The photographer.
a photographer, a third person. So for me also what it is laying out the possibilities. And also I think laying out the possibilities in a photograph doesn't mean that we can't study them, right? Sometimes it's very, very hard, but this is the methodology I work with.
Petra has a question. Yeah, thank you. It was really nice to see the photos and learn about your context. What is just what interests me is exactly actually that format that we see here, because we think of photography these days in this kind of a showing the families. It's very personal. So there's photos that mean something to the person who took the photograph. It's taken by me or someone who wants to show this, or then it is about to me and a family and whatever. But this format of photographs of that time, and I do not know if this was more common or is this kind of a country specific, that you actually have them almost as postcards. So then of course if the meaning, the point is that this photograph would be and is intended or could be used as a postcard. So then this intention changes quite a lot, because then it doesn't need to be, you can use anybody's any pictures that you just pick up as because this is actually what may have happened. How was this? Were they always like this? Was this only the kind of studio things, or why were they used as postcards? Where did you find them if they were? So do you know anything about sort of how were they sold, or where they just came with when the photographs were actually developed and made for the purchasing?
Well, I mean, there's the printing on a postcard that was very common, and if they were used as postcards, it's mostly for private networks. So like in lieu of a letter, for instance, people would write. This is a short one, but you would write, For instance, the military service is compulsory, so a lot of soldiers would send their portraits to their loved ones, right? To also prove that I'm alive, well, doing, But this is also what's fascinating about the Shukri Bey series. This was also a puzzle of around 20 photographs, all dedicated to Shukri Bey. To my my esteemed dear friend, cherished. So it's like this very eloquent, right? And turns out these are, the bank directors writing to each other because they attended a winter school, as a training school for the Ziraat Agriculture Bank, because that was the main bank at the time, the biggest investor for agriculture. So they attend this winter school in Ankara in February, and they're like exchanging these images, and most probably it's a photo shoot from a designated photo studio. So with this incredibly loving language, it's fascinating because they're not really family members, so they're colleagues, but also somehow classmates and friends. They're also almost, that's why I say token of self-promotion in a way. Maybe they want also something from each other.
And this was my question related to also the beauty queen image, because there it would be just we choose. It was like his pin icons, choosing that someone that I like, and then I sent it to greetings to my friends on this. So there is this kind of the personalized content is much further away than in the photographs that are family based, sort of family messages.
This is, I think, one of the exceptional indeed examples. So there was a lot of exchange of prints, But I mean, you also have a cartomania, like this collectors, right? But not so much I would have thought of family pictures per se as an existing market. And also Yeşilçam, right? The Turkish cinema industry only picks up, by the 60s. Then you have a lot of like a pin-up girl kind of circulation. But that's why I think this is very fascinating. It's one of the surviving examples, but it's the beauty contests, they're just so fascinating. This is like a 6-7 year period where these were organized by the Cumhuriyet newspaper. And that was the biggest, like the paparazzi. So the candidates would send in their photographs. They're, again, designated photo studios. You go have your picture taken for free. And they would be published over like weeks and weeks, and there would be a lot of speculation. One candidate, 1929 beauty queen, Feriha Tevfik, didn't like her picture, so she petitioned to have it changed because she didn't like her curls. So this was really big. That's maybe the only kind of the main source of gossip for many people, I think. So in that sense, maybe that's how it stands out as a circulation pattern as well. But a fascinating question to look into.
Is there any other question? No? We don't have a question from Jean. So I think we can close this wonderful lecture. And thank you, Özge, for coming
Thank
here
you so
with
much.
us
Yeah.
and telling us all these wonderful things. Well, I'm not a photographer, but I like to take pictures, so I see all this wonderful journey through the years. I really enjoy it. So now, those who are here, we would like to invite you for a drink inside, and the people who join us online, we want to thank them for also being here. And we're waiting for you for the next event that we will have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also hope that one of the outcomes I'm hoping with this research is for you all to look into their own family archives and don't take it for granted. I lost mine when I was moving from Abu Dhabi to Amsterdam. I lost a suitcase full of family photographs. It's unbelievable that I didn't think of it. It was COVID times, all of that. So don't take it for granted. So it's also one more takeaway, if anything. Thank you.